At 17, Caleb Turner inherited exactly one thing: a tiny stone cottage on the edge of town. His two older brothers inherited everything else: the family ranch, 300 acres, the cattle, the equipment, every bank account. Their father's attorney folded the will and looked at Caleb. "Your father left you the cottage personally." His oldest brother laughed. "You got the gardener's shack." The younger brother smirked. "Maybe you can rent it to squirrels." Nobody bothered hiding their amusement. Their father had spent years restoring the ranch. Surely he'd never intended the smallest building to become anyone's inheritance. 3 days later, Caleb was told to leave. "We're selling the ranch," his oldest brother said. "We don't need you getting in the way." With one backpack and an old pickup truck, Caleb drove to the cottage. It stood nearly 2 miles beyond the ranch entrance, hidden among towering oak trees, built from weathered gray stone. A slate roof sagged slightly. Wild ivy climbed one wall. The tiny place looked forgotten, but not abandoned. Inside stood handcrafted oak furniture, a cast-iron stove, shelves filled with old books. Everything had been carefully maintained. Caleb smiled. "It feels alive." The first night, he slept beside the fireplace. Rain tapped softly against the roof. For the first time since his father died, he felt safe. The next morning, he began repairing the place. He fixed broken shutters, cleared weeds from the garden, repaired the porch railing. Every day after working construction jobs, he returned to restore another small piece of the cottage. Weeks passed. One afternoon, an elderly carpenter named Walter stopped by. "You must be Caleb." "I am." Walter looked around approvingly. "Your father would be proud." "You knew him?" Walter smiled. "For 40 years. He slowly walked through the cottage. Finally, he stopped beside the stone fireplace. "You know?" "What?" "This room used to be larger." Caleb looked confused. "What do you mean?" Walter pointed toward one thick stone wall. "There used to be stairs here." "Stairs? They led underground." Caleb frowned. "I don't see anything." Walter gently knocked against the stones. Most sounded solid. One section echoed. "Hollow." Walter smiled. "Interesting. You think something's behind it?" "I know there used to be." Before leaving, he quietly added, "Your father sealed it himself." "Did he ever say why?" Walter shook his head. "Only that someday the right son would understand." Those words stayed with Caleb. 3 days later, a black luxury SUV appeared outside the cottage. A sharply dressed woman stepped out. "My name is Victoria Hayes." She smiled professionally. "My company would like to purchase your property." Caleb laughed. "This little cottage. We'll offer $3 million. He stared. "For this place?" "Cash." "No." Victoria remained calm. "If you reconsider." She handed him a business card. "Call me." Then she drove away. 2 days later, another representative arrived. Different company, different offer. $6 million. Again, Caleb refused. Now he knew. The cottage wasn't valuable because of the building. Something hidden beneath it mattered. That evening, Caleb examined the stone wall beside the fireplace. Most stones were permanently mortared together, except 4 near the floor. Their mortar looked newer. His heartbeat quickened. Using an old masonry chisel, he carefully loosened the stones. Behind them appeared a heavy iron lever. He pulled it. A deep rumble echoed beneath the cottage. The entire stone fireplace slowly slid sideways. Cold air drifted upward. Hidden beneath the floor stood a circular stone staircase descending into darkness. Caleb grabbed a lantern. This can't be real. Every instinct warned him to stop. Instead, he climbed down. The staircase opened into an enormous underground chamber. He froze. Concrete walls, steel support beams, industrial generators, climate-controlled archive rooms, shelves packed with leather-bound journals, historic property deeds, engineering surveys, agricultural reports, rows of locked filing cabinets. This wasn't an old cellar. It looked like a hidden operations headquarters. At the center stood an enormous oak table. One envelope rested there. Across the front, written in his father's unmistakable handwriting, were 3 words. For Caleb only. His hands trembled. How had his father planned all this? He carefully opened the envelope. The first sentence made his blood run cold. "If you've reached this cellar, then the people trying to buy the cottage have probably found you already." Trying? Why? Before he could continue, a low engine echoed faintly overhead. Then another. Then another. He hurried toward an old security monitor mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life. Outside the cottage, Three black SUVs had just stopped beside the front gate. 6 strangers stepped out carrying surveying equipment and locked aluminum document cases. They weren't looking at the cottage roof. They weren't inspecting the garden. They were walking directly toward the hidden fireplace. Caleb's heart pounded. 3 black SUVs stood outside the cottage. 6 strangers climbed out. None carried farming equipment. None looked interested in buying a tiny stone house. Each carried surveying instruments, encrypted radios, and heavy aluminum document cases. They weren't searching for the cottage. They were searching for what had been hidden beneath it. Caleb turned back to the letter. His hands trembled as he continued reading. If they've arrived, then they finally uncovered the trail I spent 30 years protecting. He swallowed. The next sentence stopped him cold. This underground archive isn't your inheritance. Caleb frowned. If the archive wasn't the inheritance, then what was? He continued reading. 30 years earlier, his father, Benjamin Turner, had been one of the state's most respected agricultural engineers. While helping neighboring counties evaluate farmland, Benjamin discovered something extraordinary. Not buried gold, not oil, not rare minerals. He discovered one of the largest, untouched underground freshwater aquifers in the region, extending beneath thousands of acres of surrounding farmland. The discovery changed everything. Agricultural corporations quietly realized that whoever controlled the water rights would eventually control the future of farming across the valley. Several investment groups secretly began buying ranches, farms, and abandoned land through shell companies. They weren't interested in cattle. They wanted permanent ownership of the groundwater. Benjamin refused every offer. Instead, he quietly purchased the legal water rights beneath the neighboring properties whenever struggling farmers were willing to sell them. Over 3 decades, he assembled the Turner Water Trust. Every deed, every groundwater survey, every engineering report, every legal agreement, every document exposing decades of fraudulent land acquisitions. Everything remained hidden beneath the tiny cottage. The cottage had never been the inheritance. It had protected the archive, waiting for one person, waiting for Caleb. A modern valuation report slipped from the folder. Estimated value of the Turner Water Trust: $372 million. Caleb stared silently. $372 million. Not because of the cottage. Because the trust legally controlled the groundwater rights beneath nearly 15,000 acres. Above him came heavy footsteps. The strangers had entered the cottage. Benjamin's letter continued. The trust transfers only to the child who chooses to restore a home before discovering its value. A smile slowly appeared on Caleb's face. Without realizing it, he had already fulfilled the condition. He repaired the roof, restored the garden, fixed the porch. He never expected a reward. He simply wanted to save the place his father loved. The next pages contained original deeds, engineering blueprints, hydrological surveys, environmental studies. Everything had been preserved with incredible care. Then Caleb noticed another envelope. Smaller, addressed simply, "My youngest son." His hands shook as he opened it. "Caleb, if you're reading this, then your brothers probably laughed at the cottage." A tear rolled down his cheek. "I expected they would. Most people measure inheritance by size. I always measured it by responsibility." He continued reading. "I watched the 3 of you grow into men. Your oldest brother learned how to make money. Your middle brother learned how to win arguments. You learned how to repair broken things." Caleb wiped his eyes. The letter continued. "When the barn roof collapsed, you fixed it before anyone asked. When old Mrs. Carter's fence blew down, you rebuilt it without charging her. When this little cottage needed repairs, you smiled instead of complaining. That's when I knew. You would protect what others would exploit." The final paragraph read, "The cottage wasn't your inheritance. Your character was. The trust simply follows it." A loud voice echoed through the underground chamber. "The archive has been opened. Find the documents." Benjamin's final instruction appeared beneath his signature. "Leave through the spring tunnel." A blueprint revealed a concealed exit behind the archive's water filtration system. Caleb quickly packed every journal, survey, deed, engineering report, and trust agreement into waterproof carrying cases. He hurried toward the rear of the chamber. Behind several massive filtration tanks stood a large iron valve wheel. He turned it with both hands. A hidden concrete wall slowly slid aside. A narrow tunnel stretched into darkness. Behind him, another voice shouted, "He's escaping." Without hesitation, Caleb entered the passage. The tunnel followed the natural underground spring beneath the valley. Crystal clear water flowed beside the narrow stone walkway. After nearly 40 minutes, daylight appeared ahead. He emerged inside an old stone pump house hidden beside a quiet river several miles from the cottage. Inside waited a wooden desk, a satellite phone, fresh batteries, a locked briefcase, and one final envelope. Benjamin had planned every detail decades earlier. Inside rested attorney Sarah Mitchell's business card. Below it, one handwritten sentence read, "Call immediately." Caleb picked up the satellite phone. Sarah answered before the second ring. "Caleb Turner? You knew I'd call. We've been preparing for your call for 17 years. Sarah explained everything. Benjamin had legally established the Turner Water Trust decades earlier. The moment Caleb recovered the original archive, ownership transferred automatically. At precisely the same time, encrypted legal notices were delivered to state water authorities, environmental agencies, land registries, and financial crime investigators. The people searching the cottage weren't property investors. They represented shell corporations that had spent decades trying to illegally obtain the Turner water rights. Benjamin's archive documented everything: forged deeds, corporate bribery, illegal groundwater contracts, money laundering, hidden ownership networks, fraudulent water right transfers, every illegal transaction. Within days, search warrants were executed across multiple states. Corporate offices were raided. Executives were arrested. Fraudulent water right claims were canceled. The Turner Water Trust retained permanent ownership of every protected groundwater easement. Several weeks later, independent hydrologists confirmed Benjamin's original findings. The aquifer contained enough naturally replenished freshwater to sustainably support surrounding farms for generations, if managed responsibly. News reporters expected Caleb to sell the trust immediately. Instead, he surprised everyone. He established strict conservation agreements that guaranteed family farms affordable long-term water access. No corporation could monopolize the resource. Modern irrigation systems were installed throughout the valley to reduce waste. The profits funded agricultural scholarships, rural trade schools, emergency housing for homeless teenagers, and grants that helped struggling families repair their homes instead of losing them. Exactly the kind of help Caleb had once desperately needed. As for his brothers, they soon learned an uncomfortable truth. The ranch they had fought so hard to keep depended entirely on groundwater controlled by the Turner Water Trust. They arrived at the cottage weeks later. Not with lawyers, with apologies. Caleb listened quietly. He chose not to seek revenge. Instead, he offered them the same fair water agreements every neighboring ranch received. No special treatment. No punishment. Just fairness. Over time, the family slowly rebuilt something far more valuable than an inheritance: trust. The tiny stone cottage remained Caleb's home. He restored every room himself. The garden bloomed every spring. Children from nearby schools visited to learn about water conservation and responsible farming. The hidden cellar remained sealed once more, not because it contained secrets, but because its greatest purpose had already been fulfilled. Visitors often asked why a man worth hundreds of millions still lived in such a modest cottage. Caleb always smiled before answering. "My father didn't leave me a fortune. He left me a reason to deserve one." Most people believed he became wealthy because he unlocked a hidden cellar beneath the tiny house. That wasn't the real story. The cellar wasn't the treasure. The underground archive wasn't the treasure. Even the Turner Water Trust wasn't the greatest inheritance. Benjamin Turner left his youngest son something far more valuable: the wisdom to protect others before enriching himself, the courage to rebuild instead of resent,